Thanks again for coming back and tuning in to another daily reading from Convergence, Book 1 of the Dragon Within Saga. If you like what you've been hearing so far, please check out my website. You can order the book right from it. The link will be in the description. And we're going to start in Chapter 5 today. We just finished Chapter 4 and the Grand Wizard in Telos, who consulted the Book of All and has the beginning of an answer. But in Chapter 5, we're not going to be finding out more about Telos. We're going to be introduced to another character, my personal favorite for people who know me and follow me on social media, obvious reasons, Erebaldodrosis. Chapter 5 is named Akindra, which is Draconic for warrior poet. So here we go. Without further ado, let's start in Chapter 5. Looking upon her beautifully perfect form, while she held her twin blades against the skin of his neck, he could not help but admit that he wished he could stay and watch her deep breaths continue well beyond the years he was given to live. The side of her face, where he had struck her during their battle, was beginning to redden and would, without a doubt, leave a very prominent purplish bruise infused with all the colors of the known spectrum. Yet in his eyes, there was neither blemish nor imperfection that could lessen the beauty he had first witnessed just 3 days ago. Continuing to encase his memory of her with his soul, he admitted to himself that quite possibly she was the only one capable of forming the bond with him he had longed for his entire life. He had traveled the world and witnessed all of its beauties, from the vastly enormous and equally breathless Drisdine Mountains that overlooked the pinnacle of life, causing every imaginable color to be harnessed and then reflected in the setting sun, to the darkly mysterious women of the Oolong Desert, where were said to have the ability to mesmerize any man in the deep oceanic blues of their eyes. On a few occasions he had been enthralled by both, once at a time. However, battling this woman, this Soliana, was the closest he had come to forming a true connection in decades. Regardless of the company he kept, including the times where his walk saw only one set of footprints, and though he was regaled with the fame and fortune befitting one such as he, who possessed unequaled skill with both the blade and quill, he was always alone in his endeavors. That is not to say he was lonely by any means, as he was always able to find the company he needed, whether it be on the battlefield standing at the head of an army of his current employer, usually across from some form of evil, or on the battlefield of his momentary bed next to the woman who surrendered to his arms as part of the spoils of his persona. Desiring to be held by her arms one last time, he tried to take an instinctive step toward her, if for no other reason than to say goodbye, but the pressure her blades exerted upon his neck prevented any and all movement. And yet, as saddened as he was that he would never have the opportunity to explore all of who she was and was yet to be, the warrior within him savagely and fiercely welcomed the moment they crossed blades, not out of the expectation that he might fight an opponent worthy of his skill, but because their blades had met over and over in the intimate and deadly dance of metal on metal, wherein he was allowed to share her space. Lingering upon the smoothness of her lips, he had wished only that he was able to taste them again, but was still eternally grateful he had. He remembered their taste being sweeter than the famous meat of the dwarves, a flavor he had liberally enjoyed on more than one occasion. Committing this moment to his memory as a vow to never forget, regardless of the ages that could pass before his fortunes were pleased enough with his deeds to reward him with her presence again when she too traveled to the stars, he took a deep breath and steeled himself for what was to come. When he reluctantly released his desire to be with her for his own selfish intent, he could not help but breathe deeply again in an effort to appreciate the floral aroma of her bright, brilliantly blonde locks of hair now spilling across her neck. Dropping his head from the weight of the unexplained and terrible scene that had just unfolded before him, consuming him with its unstoppable avalanche, he closed his eyes because he knew it was time for him to die. It would not be long before her dark blades entered his flesh, requiting him from the race of elves, who only days before saw him as one of their own, and no doubt would celebrate his execution at the hands of the duty-bound Soliana Solaris. The truth would come crashing down upon their nation when news of King Randunio's death breached the joyous celebration of the Inglandonin, the sacred festival of greater consciousness. It was this festival and his part to be played in it at the behest of his star daughter, Princess Glenovia, that drew him back to Mectheniel, the legendary city of light and his longtime home. He allowed his eyes a few last moments to focus on her before he surveyed the awful consequence of being him. When he was at last able to avert his gaze from her uncanny beauty, he made himself look upon the faces of each of his fallen foes until he met, with terrible realization, his childhood brother, the now dead king and final victim of his famous blade. The events of the last 3 days stood in a desperate contrast to those of his final morning. Before embracing the final moments of his life, he looked up towards the gods of the elves, who reportedly were as numerous as the stars in the sky. In fact, they were the stars in the sky. He silently questioned and bid them answer now. As numerous as they were, they could allow this to happen. Just 3 days prior, he remembered walking through the woods of the only land he had ever called home. He remembered the joy in his heart at being requested by Princess Glenovia, his star daughter, to be the recognized Draheen of her Indri Primos during the Inglandonim. His would be the honor of the only man who would witness and participate in such a sacred ceremony as the honored titled. He remembered how peaceful his mind had become at the thought of seeing the one and only other living person he could and would always call his friend. But most prominently, he remembered the overall connection he felt when he saw her for the first time, as a blazing, blonde, flashing whirlwind fluidly dancing within a mimicked battle with her twin red blades as he approached the gates of Mectheniel. Though it now seemed like a lifetime ago, with no more possibility than that of touching the sun, he still remembered it with much vivid awareness, as he did when it pierced the veil of night to brilliantly rise again. All right, we're going to stop right there. Seems like a great place to stop. Thanks again for tuning in, and next time we're going to keep continuing reading in chapter 5 for Erebath, and we're going to see what's going to happen. So thanks again. Have a wonderful day. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share, or whatever you want to do, and thank you for pardoning the horrible reading. I appreciate it. Thank you for tuning in, and as always, until next time, release your dragon within.